Tomorrow, about 24 hours from now, it will be Christmas 2024. We have seen and celebrated many a Christmas. It is doubtful, however, if we are bothered to reflect truthfully about the meaning and significance of Christmas. It so happens that it is possible for us to celebrate without thinking or celebrate without knowing the meaning of what we celebrate. Therefore, the question will arise if we stop for a moment and think if we are indeed celebrating what we think we are celebrating, or we are simply celebrating for the sake of celebrating. And perhaps most of you will agree with me that what we have done so far with regard to Christmas, as perhaps with regards to all other festivals we celebrate, it's not what we supposedly celebrate that we celebrate. It's only our need to celebrate that we celebrate. Therefore, these very significant events that are encapsulated in the festivals that we celebrate leave us completely untouched. I thought I would simply make a reference to this universal pattern in order to alert my friends to this reality and leave the rest to their own individual reflections. Now, the first thing I want to say about this great event, perhaps the most universal of all events, is that the Christmas event, the original Christmas event, should strike us particularly for the sparseness of its material circumstances. You can't possibly imagine a birth in material circumstances more destitute and desperate than the circumstances in which Mary delivered her boy Jesus. It's a situation of unimaginable deprivation. The least that a woman should have when the hour comes upon her is the comfort and security of home, if not the facility of a good maternity hospital. Mary was denied even that basic comfort. Well, then an inn was the second option, but the door of the inn was shut against her because she was poor. Because the excuse given is that there is no room in the inn, but all of us know that there will be rooms in the inn if you are rich enough. So it's another indication of the material destitution of this poor family, that the doors of the inn were banged shut against them. Their last resort is, of course, the cattle shed. You can imagine how hygienic the conditions were. I don't want to go into further details of this because that would make it more sentimental than truthful. What I want to underline is a very important fact from the spiritual point of view, and that is, both with respect to the family details of Jesus and the circumstances of his birth, the important characteristic that we need to keep in mind if we are to understand the meaning of the birth of Jesus is that he was born in circumstances reduced to the bare bottom line, perhaps far below the bottom line of ordinary human existence. Now, this has got many ramifications, many implications. Let me only make a very brief mention of just one of those implications, and that is, most people today assume that our circumstances are too formidable in their influences, particularly restricting influences upon us. Only those who are favored by fortunate circumstances can make significant headways in their life, or make significant contributions to human welfare. Whereas the heroism in the birth and the subsequent mission of Jesus Christ is that if you have the right spirit, the right understanding, the right alignment with the supreme source of human empowerment, which we understand by the word God, then the deprivation of your circumstances need not stand in the way. Rather, you will be able to far transcend the limiting, restricting, and hindering influence of your circumstances. Now, there is another important aspect to this, and that is, if you look at the great men and women of the past who have made significant contributions to the spiritual empowerment of humankind, whether that be of Jesus Christ or of Lord Buddha or whoever, you will know that it was not because of their material affluence or favorable circumstances or social clout that they did the tremendous work that we cherish and remember even today. Of course, Lord Buddha was born in a palace. He was a prince, but he renounced the palace and all the material advantages in order to take to the path of eternal truth. So from that perspective, overabundance of material affluence is a hindrance, not a help. So now take a political instance to understand this better. Mahatma Gandhi embraced voluntary poverty, symbolized by the half-naked fakir in the memorable words of Winston Churchill. It was not that Mahatma Gandhi could not have afforded proper clothes. It is that cladding himself in this kind of gentlemanly attire was superfluous to the mission of his life. You can't possibly imagine the Mahatma in a three-piece suit. I'm inclined to think, irrespective of the portraits of Jesus that we have, that Jesus too lived in abject poverty, material poverty. And this is not speculation. Jesus himself said so. He said, the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. That's the absolute bottom line of poverty. Now, it so happens, as Jesus also indicates through some of the parables that he taught, that those who are inured to happy circumstances of life, those who are used to comfortable ways, luxurious living, etc., get progressively alienated from the rest of humanity. Take the instance of the story of Lazarus and the rich man. Jesus, with a few beautiful but adequate strokes, portrays the plight of the rich man whose name we do not know, perhaps he represents all the rich men of the world, as one who lives in splendid isolation from the rest of humanity. That's the reason why a man lay at his gate rotting to death, and perhaps he didn't even become aware of this. So wealth becomes a principle of disconnection, and disconnection results in alienation. This is also historically true. If you look at the condition in Europe and North America, what's called the Euro-American ethno-cultural bloc, you see this principle illustrated and demonstrated quite amply. The Western culture today, and Western societies in general, are described by social scientists as societies and cultures of anomie, A-N-O-M-I-E, which means the human predicament in these societies is one of atomization. Each individual exists like an atom, disconnected from all others around, and the relevance of the life of an individual to the rest of humanity is zero. Or using traditional phraseology, we might say that each individual lives for himself and dies by himself. I became acutely aware of this during my visit to Stuttgart in 1994. When in that very city, a man died in his apartment. He was living alone. It had nothing to do with the people living in the apartments near him, at a distance of less than 1 foot. He lived all by himself, lived for himself. He died while watching television. And 3 days after his death, when somebody accidentally came by, his dead body was seen sitting in the couch, in the seat, and the television was still on. Apparently, his dead body had been watching television programs for 3 days. That particular episode has remained with me as an illustration of the predicament. Probably this is an extreme case, but it certainly is a relevant case. So this kind of way of life actually atomizes human existence, and the atomized individual is disconnected from everybody else. He is one without a neighbor, and therefore he has no relevance to anyone. Now, differences in degree apart, most people are in this kind of predicament. And Jesus comes to reverse this role. And the reversal of this situation definitely involves the shifting of emphasis and reliance from the material amenities of life to the spiritual resources, particularly the spiritual understanding of life. And in order to attain that higher enlightenment, we have to renounce our reliance on material resources. And therefore, when Jesus says, the foxes have their holes, the birds they have their nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head, he's not making a complaint. He's actually stating an important, eternally relevant truth, namely, you cannot be a pilgrim of truth and you cannot be a benefactor of humanity, living like a prince, living in the lap of luxury, characterized by a life of indulgence and wasteful living. I hope this particular aspect will appeal to or make sense to the bishops of our times, who believe that their elevation to the office of a bishop is a license to live in luxury like an earthly prince. And the more spiritual or religious leaders do this, the more irrelevant they become and more spiritually destitute, poor and bankrupt they are, and they have nothing to contribute to the life of anybody else. So, the birth of Jesus Christ actually is the unveiling of the alternate reality. It is possible for human beings to live as they are living now, depending entirely on the resources of the world, worldly resources. It's also possible to have the other option, which is completely different to this, which is to live according to the will of God, entrusting oneself to God's faithfulness, unfailing provisions to meet our needs, not our desires. So there, on account of that, a human being attains a different order of life. The previous model is based on existence. We cannot really claim that we are alive, much less fully alive, if we live only according to the desires and resources of the world, living to ourselves and thinking of others largely to the extent that they are useful to us or profitable and beneficial to us. The social instinct driven entirely by selfishness. In contrast to this, we have the way of life inaugurated by Jesus, which is the idea of abiding with. And Jesus provides a role model. That's why he is the Emmanuel, which means God with us. So rather than living by oneself and living for oneself, the idea is to live for each other and build a community of caring people. But this doesn't come naturally to us. So long as we remain obsessed with our sense of possession, mindful of what we own and what we don't, and therefore the need to see everybody else as a threat and as a source of insecurity to us, we have to liberate ourselves from our state of thraldom or dependence on these material props in order to ascend higher so that we can attain a different vision of life and reality. That's what is embodied in Jesus Christ. But for that, he would not have done what he has, and humanity would have been terribly poorer for it. So, what exactly is the heart of, or the most important aspect of this new vision and quality of life that Jesus inaugurated through his birth, which is commemorated as Christmas? With that, we come to the heart of the matter. To me, the most significant aspect of the life and work of Jesus Christ is a sense of perfect oneness with God the Father. As he says, and you see that in the 30th verse of the 10th chapter of John's Gospel, says, I and my Father are one. My Father and I are one. That is the beautiful state of happiness, of adequacy of life, if you like, the abundance of life that Jesus exemplifies. Now, every one of us needs a point of coherence in our life, for want of which we lead a divided and scattered existence. We don't live, we lead a divided and scattered existence. We merely exist. When we are one with that ultimate reality, that one reality, one with a capital O, then our personality attains that integration. And all our forces, our possibilities are concentrated, properly coordinated. And we are delivered from the limitations of our human finitude, even as we continue to be human, mortal, and finite. In a mysterious way, we are lifted out of the limitations that always inhere in our finitude, and we move from a world of the ordinary into the extraordinary. That's precisely what we see in the case of all those who responded to the Lord Jesus Christ, particularly in the case of the 12 disciples minus one, which is Judas Iscariot. And even Judas Iscariot, up to a point, up to the time he decides to sell his master, is part of this wonderful transformation. But how it happened that one who has experienced it all turned traitor and succumbed to the lure of money is a terrible mystery which continues to make me shudder even today. So, the misery of human predicament, the unblessedness of the human predicament is that while we live depending entirely on the resources of the world, which are many, which are varied, which are uncoordinated, one disconnected from the other, and therefore, to the extent that we live our life in a state of dependence on all these disparate, mutually alienated, discrete items or resources of the world, our own personality gets scattered. This is not difficult to understand. For example, if you are with a person who is serious-minded, you will be serious-minded. If you are with a person who is frivolous, you will also behave in a frivolous manner. If you are in the company of drunkards, you won't mind tasting a peg or two. If you are in the midst of ascetics, then you will be a teetotaler. There is no consistency in us. Or when you are attending a Sunday worship, you are extremely godly. But during weekdays, when you go back to your place of work or when you are in the marketplace, you are an entirely different person. So on and so forth. Or a priest or a bishop who makes a sermon is very different from the priest or bishop who administers the church. And, so there is no consistency in us. And to the extent that we are a crowd of scattered pieces that lack coordination, integration, and sense of oneness, and life is miserable. This is a secret of human misery. Whereas when you look at Jesus Christ, his personality is integrated and there is no contradiction in him because he and his Father were one. So it is this principle of integration that Jesus introduces into the framework of the human condition. It's possible for us to attain that degree or that kind of integrated personality which alone is amenable to life. So long as we remain scattered, in ourselves we are scattered. We cannot have life, and certainly not life in all its fullness. In one of his plays, Shakespeare depicts this particular state. Brutus says, I am at war with myself. George Bernard Shaw, in his play, Arms and the Man, presents a character called Major Saranoff. And he realizes this problem within himself. He says, who am I? I sense half a dozen Saranoffs popping in and out. I do not know which Saranoff represents me. Even somebody like Apostle Paul experiences a similar predicament. The 7th chapter of the letter to Romans. He says, I want to do what is right. I know what is right, but I always end up doing what is wrong. If I do not do the good that I like and I end up doing the evil that I hate, then surely I'm not in control of myself. There's another principle that's working within me, and that's the principle of death. That's what I mean by leading the scattered and divided existence. That is really what makes us weak, barren, fruitless. That is what fills our life with incompetence, impotence, misery, etc., etc. And so long as we remain in that state, we'll fail to do justice to ourselves. Jesus says there is a different way, and that's the way that Jesus came to inaugurate. And that way is a way of being integrated in your personality, and the only way you can reach that blessed state is by attaining oneness with God, who is the giver of your life. God, the giver of life. And Christmas is really the commemoration of this significant reorientation of human nature. From remaining in the state of scattered, divided existence, punctuated with misery, frustration, disenchantment, and incompetence, futility. 2, becoming fruitful, as Jesus envisaged. He said, abide in me and I in you, and then you will produce much fruit. And the secret of that fruitfulness is being integrated rather than being divided. And once we are integrated, we'll experience a tremendous eruption, or at least a tremendous birth of a new power, a new quality of personality, and therefore a new capacity for life. And that new capacity, that enhanced new capacity for life, is what Jesus refers to as life in all its fullness. The 10th chapter of the 10th verse of the 10th chapter of John's Gospel, Jesus said, I've come that they may have life, and life in all its fullness. And Christmas, therefore, and I'm going to close on this. Christmas, therefore, is the inauguration and the authentication, once and for all, of the possibility of humankind, all members of the human family, attaining life in all its fullness, life in all its fullness. And that's the reason why Matthew, in his Gospel, refers to the birth of Jesus Christ as a great light dawning on humanity, or tiding of great gladness for all humankind. This is the secret of human happiness. Deliverance from the state of miserable, scattered existence characterized by fruitlessness and futility, and led into this wonderful state, blessed state of being integrated in our personality and therefore enhanced in our capacity, enabling us to enter the blessed state of life in all its fullness. That's why Jesus is described by John as the light of life. Light of life. So Christmas is truly a festival of light. But unlike Diwali, it's a celebration of the light of life. On that I close, and I wish all of you a very significant and significantly meaningful Christmas 2024.